On a winter day in 1986, a baby girl named Sarah was born in the United Kingdom. She was the firstborn child of a young single mother who had barely turned 20 at the time. The woman lived with her parents in an area where they had relocated from Pakistan back in 1968. Moreover, Sarah was the first grandchild for her grandmother, Rajida Parvin. The girl grew up surrounded by several generations of a tightly knit family. Although the family's financial means were modest, they always placed great importance on education and believed that Sarah would have everything necessary for a happy life, love, support, and the opportunity to receive a decent education. From a young age, the girl enjoyed attending tap dance classes, swimming in the pool, and dressing up nicely. Over time, Sarah developed a special talent for figure skating, and her curiosity and fascination with the world around her impressed the adults. Even then, little Sarah knew that she would undoubtedly become a lawyer in the future. This choice surprised no one, as the girl was known for her kind-hearted personality, filled with a sincere desire to help others. Sarah was distinguished by her sociability, and her cheerful disposition was reflected in the bright sparkle of her large eyes, which perfectly complemented her curly black hair. Overall, the girl had a charming appearance. As a teenager, Sarah had the opportunity to travel around England, visiting museums and art galleries, which demonstrated her passion for art and culture. These trips also showed how independent and self-reliant she was. Later, the girl visited other parts of Europe, which only confirmed that the thirst for adventure had been passed on to Sarah from her relatives. It seemed that she was following in the footsteps of her Aunt Farnaz, who, unlike the rest of the family, chose Portugal as her home instead of Britain. Young Sarah watched with admiration as her aunt worked in women's organizations, where she was engaged in therapeutic practice. After graduating from high school, Sarah took the first step towards realizing her dream. She enrolled in the law faculty of the University of Westminster. From that moment on, she worked tirelessly to achieve her cherished goal, while also taking care of her mother and grandmother. The girl's petite body housed a passionate soul filled with inexhaustible energy. Sarah's sense of justice and equality was not limited to the walls of university lecture halls. On the contrary, the generous and compassionate girl helped refugees fleeing from violence and strived to be a voice for those whose rights were being infringed upon. In addition, Sarah volunteered at community canteens to support the homeless. Overall, she had a special gift for noticing the needs of others and always found time to come to their aid. Sarah was a girl with an easygoing and friendly personality. Her aunt Samira, who lived in Nassau, observed her niece's life from afar, and Sarah visited her several times a week. While preparing for exams, the girl asked Samira to help her study, but their sessions invariably ended with cheerful laughter. Those who knew Sarah claimed that she left a trail of joy wherever she appeared. Moreover, Sarah was exceptionally hardworking. She paid for all her expenses herself and even helped her family. The girl worked as a saleswoman at a local clothing store and knew all the residents of the neighborhood, from teenagers to the elderly. Sarah always greeted everyone with a friendly gesture and was always ready to help when needed. And although the young girl could talk for hours, it did not interfere with her ability to be an attentive listener. Sarah's generosity extended to all living creatures, and she particularly loved cats. Sometimes the girl would spend her own money to take stray kittens to the vet, care for them at home, and persuade neighbors to adopt them. Sanji Nair, Sarah's close friend, believed that the best word to describe the girl was radiant, and her main gift was the ability to charge everyone around her with optimism. Whenever Sanji was in a bad mood, he would invariably turn to his friend. Another important person in Sarah's life was her friend Carrie Shaw Peters. The girls shared a deep interest in acute social issues, particularly those related to violence against women. The friends were so close that they freely visited each other's homes and talked on the phone almost every day. In 2002, having successfully passed her exams and completed her first year of legal practice, Sarah got the opportunity to work at the Crown Prosecution Service. This was a necessary step to complete the 2-year internship and obtain a full-fledged legal qualification. This was precisely what the girl had tirelessly strived for, even when her studies had to be interrupted due to the need to care for her mother and grandmother, as well as financial difficulties. On her first day at the new job, Sarah sent her friends and family a radiant selfie, admitting that she still couldn't believe her own luck. Although the work was administrative, it was the last step towards fulfilling her long-held dream. At 35, Sarah understood that a new stage of life was beginning, and it filled her heart with incredible happiness and a sense of completeness. Moreover, the dream job gave the girl confidence in her desire to start her own family soon. Despite an extremely active life filled with work, volunteering, socializing with friends, and caring for her mother and grandmother, with whom Sarah lived in a separate room when necessary, the girl loved walking. She enjoyed moving around freely, guided by her own desires. Sarah was convinced that every woman should have the opportunity to return home at any time without hindrance, and no one, especially strangers, had the right to interfere with this. Unfortunately, it was in the neighborhood where the girl lived that a man resided whose existence seemed to revolve around encroaching upon this woman's right. His name was Jordan Maxen. He was a few years younger than Sarah and had an unknown family background. At the age of 13, Jordan had already been convicted in a juvenile court in Kent for various offenses committed between 2006 and 2009. In August 2010, when he turned 17, Maxen was found guilty of assaulting a girl. As a result of the beating, the victim suffered an eye injury, and Jordan was sentenced to 4 months of correctional detention. 11 years later, he attacked another woman, and the court again issued a ruling prohibiting him from approaching the victim for 3 years. During this entire time, Maxen was not allowed to contact his victim. By the beginning of the second decade of the 21st century, Jordan's criminal record already included 28 convictions for 69 crimes. His track record included theft, assaults on police officers and ordinary citizens, vehicle theft, traffic violations, committing illegal acts after being released on bail, and shoplifting. On his page on a popular social network, Maxen shamelessly boasted about his collection of cold weapons and generally glorified a criminal lifestyle, accompanying his posts with photographs and quotes. Moreover, he even posted fake wanted posters claiming that Jordan was being pursued by the FBI. On June 17, 2022, Maxen was released from prison after serving a sentence for criminal damage, racially aggravated harassment, and illegal possession of cold weapons. One of the conditions for his early release was attending meetings with a responsible officer. Barely leaving the prison walls, Jordan settled in a trailer on the grounds of the San Valentine Fairground Complex, a 52-hectare park located south of Hainaut Forest, the largest green space in the London borough of Redbridge. The man once again violated all agreements and, true to his habit of living outside the law, missed not one, but 2 scheduled meetings with his probation officer. As a result, the authorities decided to revoke the privilege granted to him. The probation service initiated the procedure to return Maxen behind bars on June 22, 2022, but did not immediately notify the police, delaying for 2 whole days. Early on the morning of Saturday, June 25, law enforcement officers visited Jordan's mother's house to arrest him but were met with an unpleasant surprise: the wanted man was not there. That Saturday evening, Sarah was going to meet a friend. Although closer to the appointed time, the girl realized that she was not in a particular mood to go out. She still did not cancel the meeting. For Sarah, it was always extremely important to keep her word and fulfill her commitments, not allowing her mood to influence her arrangements. Besides, she was a remarkably devoted friend. A few hours before going out, Sarah spoke on the phone with her Aunt Farnaz. Upon learning about her niece's plans, the woman admonished her to be careful. However, the girl assured her that she was not going far from home, and the route she would take that evening was familiar and safe. Sarah knew it like the back of her hand, and all the local residents recognized her. At the agreed time, the friends met at a popular local bar called the Big Spoon of Ilford, located in the western part of London. Ilford is a lively and cosmopolitan area, perfect for parties and friendly get-togethers. This is exactly what the girls did that Saturday evening. Later, they moved to the nearest bar, where Sarah drank only water. Meanwhile, Jordan Maxen was methodically getting drunk at another nearby entertainment venue. An ominous plan was brewing in his sick mind, and the man didn't even try to resist it. Jordan was determined to find a victim to attack that night. Security cameras recorded him meeting female visitors at the entrance to the bar, hugging them without permission, and trying to kiss them. Maxen was particularly persistent with one of the establishment's employees, despite her obvious disapproval of such behavior. Eventually, after 11 p.m., Jordan was kicked out of the bar, and his indecent actions remained recorded on the security cameras. Once on the street, Maxen staggered towards Romford Road Park. This, too, was caught on camera. Noticing a woman walking briskly down the street, Jordan rushed after her and approached her closely. Trying to avoid the pursuer, the frightened woman ran into the nearest store, but Maxen patiently waited for her outside. When his potential victim cautiously exited the shop, Jordan pounced on her again. He then crossed to the other side of the street but kept the woman in his sight the entire time. But as soon as she entered her house, the disappointed Maxen had to trudge on. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, when the streets began to empty, Jordan noticed another lone woman on Cranbrook Road. The cameras recorded how he rapidly closed the distance to her, but fortunately, 2 passers-by seemed to suspect something was amiss. The frightened woman still managed to reach her home unharmed, and the enraged Maxen, gesticulating wildly, turned around and walked back towards Cranbrook Road. At the same time, Sarah and her friend decided that it was time to head home. The clock had already struck 2 in the morning. The girls left the bar and went their separate ways. The friend called a taxi, while Sarah, given the short distance and the good weather, chose to walk. Cranbrook Road, which she took, was well lit, and it was only about a 10-minute walk to her house. And it was at this very moment that Jordan Maxen noticed her. According to Chief Inspector Dave Williams of the Metropolitan Police, the attacker had a clear goal: to commit violence against a woman that night, no matter what. Cranbrook Road remained busy even at these late hours, with heavy traffic. Maxen pursued Sarah for approximately 800 meters before grabbing her. Sneaking up from behind, he covered the victim's mouth with one hand and squeezed her throat with the other. He then dragged the girl onto a forest path, where he subjected her to sexual violence and brutally beat her. Despite Sarah's desperate resistance, Jordan's inhuman rage prevailed. The entire bestial attack lasted 9 minutes. Afterward, Maxen returned on foot to his place of residence as if nothing had happened. Around 2:30 a.m. on June 26, 2022, Sarah was found on a sidewalk in Ilford. Her belongings were chaotically scattered along Cranbrook Road. The girl had been brutally beaten and was partially undressed. However, despite the horrific injuries, a spark of life still flickered in her body. A passerby who came across the bloodied Sarah performed chest compressions and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation until the ambulance arrived. But unfortunately, even these efforts were not enough to save the young life. Sarah passed away at the hospital at 9:58 a.m. on Sunday. While law enforcement officers were searching for the suspect, security cameras in the park recorded Jordan Maxen trying to dispose of his clothes around 11 a.m. At the same time, police officers knocked on the door of Sarah's grandmother's home and asked her to identify her granddaughter in the footage from the bar's cameras. When the elderly woman confirmed that it was indeed Sarah in the recording, the officers finally told her about the tragedy that had occurred. Qasim Ali, the uncle of the deceased girl, took on the difficult task of informing other family members about the terrible news, including Aunt Farnaz. In distant Portugal, the woman, choking back tears, recalled their phone conversation on that fatal Saturday night. After delivering the devastating news to her own children, Farnaz immediately flew to London. The entire family was engulfed in shock and the unbearable pain of loss. Eating, sleeping, or simply talking became almost impossible. Although the loved ones could barely bring themselves to talk about Sarah's death, they simultaneously could not think about anything else. Meanwhile, detectives launched a large-scale investigation in the area where the girl's mutilated body was found. One of the primary steps was to retrieve footage from security cameras to track the attacker's movements. This data, along with the bloody fingerprints left by the criminal at the scene of the tragedy, allowed for the prompt identification of Jordan Maxen. The investigators then determined his whereabouts using the city's video monitoring system. Having obtained clear images of the main suspect, Inspector Dave Williams sent an officer to San Valentine's Fairground to check if any of the locals recognized Maxen. The operation was a success. The wanted man, who was carelessly sleeping in his trailer, was located almost immediately. Law enforcement agencies promptly arrested Jordan. Confused and stunned by the abrupt awakening, the man offered no resistance. In his temporary dwelling, blood-stained clothes and shoes were found, which the killer had unsuccessfully tried to dispose of. Despite numerous hours of interrogation, Maxen stubbornly remained silent. At the same time, more and more footage from surveillance cameras continued to arrive, allowing investigators to reconstruct the chronology of the tragic event step by step. The high-profile crime prompted Justin Ressela, the inspector for probation issues, to highlight a whole range of miscalculations in the relevant services work regarding Jordan. It was noted that Maxen, starting from the age of 16, consistently demonstrated antisocial behavior both in places of detention and outside their walls, which made him a high-risk offender. However, contrary to the obvious, the relevant authorities failed to take appropriate control measures. If this had been done in a timely manner, the issue of returning Jordan behind bars would have been resolved much more promptly after he ignored the mandatory meetings with his supervisor. On Wednesday, June 29, through a statement read by a police representative, Sarah's family expressed how shocked they had felt over the past few days. Of course, for them, it was an irreparable loss, and the emptiness in their hearts seemed insurmountable. However, the relatives emphasized that the warmth and sympathy shown by society had become invaluable support for them and a testament to the mighty strength of spirit of their beloved Sarah. The Alina family had to find strength within themselves even when it seemed that no emotional resources were left. Aunt Farnaz took on the difficult task of communicating with the media and law enforcement officials. Despite the overwhelming shock and unspeakable pain of loss, the family, especially Farnaz, given her experience working in the relevant field, understood that it was now crucial to keep the situation under control and protect Sarah, the true and only victim of this tragedy, from possible unworthy insinuations by certain societal circles or unscrupulous media. On July 1, 2022, a preliminary hearing in the case took place, and September 30 of the same year was set as the date for the evidence review session as part of the full trial. However, on the day of the scheduled court hearing, Jordan Maxen failed to appear, citing a positive COVID-19 test. As a result, the hearing had to be postponed. On Saturday, July 2, Sarah's relatives organized a memorial procession for the girl. The route followed the same path she had taken home on that fatal night in June. Many of those present at this mournful procession were dressed in white, a color symbolizing silent solidarity with the murdered girl. Among the participants was a coalition of over 120 organizations fighting against violence towards women. This was just one of the many associations that worked closely with Sarah Alina's family. As they repeatedly emphasized in public statements, their goal was to achieve justice and hold the perpetrators accountable. But above all, they called for focusing society's attention on what they considered a key issue: the need to resolutely confront harmful attitudes and deviant behavior in men and immediately stop the actions of offenders. During the preliminary hearing before the investigation at the East London court in the Old Bailey, forensic expert Nadia Pershaw stated that, in her opinion, there were strong grounds to believe that local police officers had the ability and should have made more efforts to search for and detain Jordan Maxen prior to his attack on Sarah. Accordingly, she recommended involving jurors in considering this issue. Moreover, Pershaw insisted that the investigation should also include an analysis of the actions of the staff of correctional institutions and the probation service. According to her estimates, this work was supposed to take at least a month. On November 16, 2022, Jordan ignored the court hearing for the second time, despite the fact that the presence of the accused was mandatory. Eventually, a hearing was organized via video conference. This time, Maxen pleaded guilty. Prosecutor Oliver Glasgow then characterized him as an extremely dangerous individual who should under no circumstances be released on bail. This position was fully supported by Judge Chimagrab. As for the sentencing, it was postponed until December 14 of the same year. However, on this day, the defendant once again refused to appear in the courtroom. Still, even this series of brazen violations did not prevent the British justice system from sentencing Jordan Maxen to life imprisonment with the right to parole no earlier than after 36 years for the brutal attack and murder of Sarah Alina. The accused and his lawyers filed an appeal, and the prison term was reduced to 33 years. The court justified its decision by stating that for most of the attack, the victim was unconscious and, therefore, allegedly did not experience suffering, which was recognized as a mitigating circumstance. However, less than 4 months passed before it became known that Maxen had managed to establish an intimate relationship with a woman who presumably worked at Belmarsh Prison in South London, although she was not a direct employee of the prison service. The Metropolitan Police reported the arrest of a 32-year-old individual whose name was not disclosed. She is currently under investigation on suspicion of improperly performing the duties of a public servant. Meanwhile, Sarah's relatives lovingly and proudly remember her bright and eventful life, which they still miss beyond words. For her part, Aunt Farnaz continues to actively speak out against violence towards women and girls. In March 2023, she participated in a large-scale protest march organized by a number of public associations that seek to draw society's attention to the problem and raise public awareness. The protesters marched through a bustling business district of West London and gathered in Trafalgar Square. Among other slogans, the protesters stated that the lack of decisive action against male aggression is tantamount to connivance and contempt on the part of the authorities. This story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Be sure to like and subscribe to support our channel. Thanks for watching and bye everyone.